Hello, thank you for joining me for my next video. First off, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for your support. Without that, it wouldn't have pushed me to keep going and work out what I want to do next. When I started my first video, I was very clear on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to put across to the world. But to have support and growth of over 400 subscribers in just under 2 weeks is incredible. And it shows that you clearly want to hear my opinion on things and my voice, and I feel I have a duty to do that. So I wouldn't probably be here now without that, so I'm very grateful to everyone. So going forward, any questions that you might have, leave in the email that I'm going to link just here. So because you leave comments, it's harder for me to go through them. So if you send me an email, just what you want me to cover, topics you want me to talk about, put it down there and I'll read that. I'll respond to it if I can, and I will cover that in future videos. So in my first video, I spoke about just a bit me, my intro, who I am, and to get the support that I've had from just the first video is incredible. So I'm very flattered. I want to say a big thank you to my mum's channel and my mum's friends channel for endorsing me. Without them, I would not have you joining me now. So I like to think I've had a bit of a head start. I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, let's start talking together. So in this video, I want to kind of talk about a specific subject, and in future videos go into different topics that talk about autism and mental health and how they're intertwined, and how I became who I am through discovery and through self-learning and understanding what it is to be autistic and what it also means just to be me. So in this video, I want to talk about where I sort of learned where I was able to communicate and how that allowed me to begin the path of contemplation. It all started when I was in secondary school. Now, when I was in secondary school, I found things very challenging. I wasn't always very focused in classrooms. I was never able to put my head down and also communicate on a social level with other members of staff, teachers, TAs, and other peers, students, wherever you are in the world. And I was never sure why. I never really knew why I couldn't fit in. But the problem is that I was endorsed with my behaviour. So I was very much someone who was kind of centre of attention. I wasn't someone who was shy, kept themselves to themselves. I was always someone who liked to be centre of attention. And I think when you have a mindset like that, whether or not that's an autistic trait, but when you have something that endorses you, whether or not what you're doing, how you're behaving is either negative or positive, if you're doing something and the people around you are getting enjoyment from that, that's like you thrive from that. So I remember as a child, I was always thriving from being a centre of attention, because everyone around me was sort of, what the term is, it's egg you on, kind of make you want to do it more, because I enjoyed the gratification of getting their attention. Now, looking back, I obviously realised that it was a form of sort of manipulation. So they were able to, in a sense, use me for their own enjoyment when I would suffer the consequences. Now, when I was younger, I never really understood that. I don't think really anyone does when you're young. You just do things that you think works. You sort of throw at the dartboard and whatever sticks, sticks. And so I'd always struggled massively in school, especially secondary. But I'd always had problems throughout growing up. I can go into them as well in future videos. I think it could be quite fun just to have a bit of a laugh, because I was a quite troublesome child, a bit of a reckless boy. But I want to focus on kind of the matter and how I became who I am. And it sort of stemmed from the fact that I'd always struggled in growing up in schools, at home, with my own, how I perceived the world, how I treated people, not negatively, but just in a more obstructive light. I was never a horrible child, but I was challenging. And I, obviously at school, was a way of getting away from that, but also amplifying that energy, which obviously caused me a lot of problems in school. So going forward, I realised that there was something fundamentally different about me, but I never really knew what. I didn't know how to do it, because it didn't come to me very clearly. And the biggest change happened was in 2009, when I had just turned 13 at the time, 14. And I had hit my second year at secondary, And it was very clear that I wasn't fitting in very well and I was finding it very difficult. So my mother agreed to take me out and look for somewhere else. Now, at the time, I wasn't aware of where I was going. And I had no idea of what type of school I wanted to be in. I just assumed that my mother wanted to find me a school that was better suited for me and my needs. But at the time, I didn't assume that special needs schools were a thing. It didn't really come up to me because I knew I was different. I didn't know how I was different. I just knew I was. And I kind of assumed, well, if that was a thing, well, then why am I not there already? Why did I not get put there in the first place? So it never really stuck out to me. And so I went to visit this school, about 20 minutes from where I live. And in a nutshell, that place became my most beloved memories, if not one of the most beloved memories of mine. And I couldn't thank everyone there for what I've learned from the lessons they taught me. The person I became fundamentally began at that place. And it was very simple because I can pinpoint really when the transitions turned for me and how I became who I am from just those 2 years, those 2.5 years that I was there. So it sort of came from me really that I went to this school. It was clear that it was different. My mother had reservations. I kind of persevered. And what I learned was really, this was a different place for me. This was a different environment that I'm not used to. And it was very surreal to see people with challenging behaviour that clearly was more intense than I was. And that was kind of the point. This is where we need to start focusing on that, because that's where I learned that I was different. I was witnessing people around me. I was seeing like what I call a mirror image. I was seeing people as if how they would see me, but they were higher on levels of challenging behaviours. And I sort of was fascinated. Well, why am I here then? I can't be this bad. And as much as I knew that I had autism, I knew that I was on the spectrum. So in that sense, I had a place here. I was supposed to be here, but was I supposed to be like that? But no, I wasn't. I didn't feel like I needed to be that person or those types of people. So I wanted to contemplate of what defines us as challenging, what they do compared to what I do. Am I being right? Should I be like that, or should they be more like me? And that's when I started to contemplate, well, what is me and what do I do? What are my values and what do I seek to do in the world? And going from that, I started off being bullied. I was obviously different. Most of the time I was bullied for not being challenging. I was sort of seen as a goody two-shoes or the posh boy. And that was obviously very surreal for me because only a few months prior to that, I was kind of seen as the sort of Tasmanian devil of the school. So to sort of go from that shift, it was such a contrast for me. And those changes, those movements began to form a sort of level of contemplation in my own head and who I was. And I began to sort of step out of the box and think, well, what am I? What's my place? Am I as bad as I thought I am? Or clearly, could I be better because I'm nowhere near as bad as some of these other students are? So I had to sort of learn from that of where I was going to go. And over the course of a few weeks, the bullying got worse. But the one thing that I learned with bullying was that bullying is a way of expression. Whether or not they're doing it to get gratification from their friends and they're enjoying them, seeing them bully someone else. But ultimately, it's a form of control, it's a form of power. And when you're being bullied by someone, they're seeking your reaction. Ultimately, they're seeking a reaction. They don't do it necessarily because it's enjoying. What they inflict on you isn't the thing they thrive from. It's the reaction they get from you. It's that sort of, they want the prey to wither down. They want them to feel scared because it makes them feel powerful. And when you don't give someone that power, they have nothing to work with, and therefore it dies down. And obviously it doesn't work the same for everyone. And obviously with me, I was in a situation where I had good luck. I never went to teachers. I never complained to anyone because, in the the traditional school manner, when they say to your child, the child says to the parent, that, I've just been bullied. I've got this going on, but please don't do anything because it's going to make things worse. And many times it does. And I think that mindset stuck with me ever since the beginning of it all. And I knew that the only way to get through this is to just let it happen. Because if I don't give them that control, because it may not happen first time, it may infuriate them more that I'm not giving them control, and therefore they might try and push boundaries. And that indeed happened, but only very short term. And it made me learn that it's a way of them feeding off your power. And if you don't give them that, they'll move on to someone else. And that's exactly what they did. And of course, obviously, I wasn't bullied just by one person. There was obviously multiple students that I had altercations with. And one moment from that is what highlighted the beginning for the turn for me. This was only a few months in, probably not even that, maybe a few weeks into starting this new school. And I was obviously nowhere near fitted in. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to become. And I began to realise, well, where is my place? And it was at that moment that I had a situation that happened that made me go, wow, okay, this is huge. And it was a moment during the day when I was about to go to the toilet, and a student who I'd had problems with before, not indirectly actually, this was a student actually that kind of was the one in the background, the kind of the friend of the friend that allowed the bullying to happen. But I had a direct altercation with this one, and he walked around the corridor and I was about to go into the toilet, and he said to me, don't go in there, because if you do, I'm going to put your head down the toilet. Now, obviously that was quite frightening because I'd never heard that before. But my reaction wasn't to run, wasn't to see if he was bluffing and just go in anyway. It was to stand up for myself. And I was only 14 at the time, 14, 15. And I turned around and said to him, I said, well, why? I stood my ground, I stood in that door, I remember with my hand on the door, and I just said, well, why? Why would you do that? What's that going to give you? How does that make you as a person? And I don't know where that came from. That just came deep within me. It just came from something inside me, made me say those words. Fundamentally, what are you going to get from doing that? How does that make you a decent human by hurting someone else? And he stood there and he looked at me and he did nothing but walk past. He didn't retaliate. He didn't snigger. He just looked at me and just continued on his way. And later that day, he found me in the cafeteria and he apologised. And he said, you made me think. And at that moment was the moment everything began to change for me. Because I realised that I had an ability to communicate, to validate someone's point of view. And of course, it doesn't always apply for everyone. But I learned fundamentally that I had an ability to communicate with someone on a fundamental level that can change their mindset. And this was someone who was known for being quite a bully. This wasn't just me, but this was mostly new students that he would bully, and he would do it with his friends. And I knew that. And so to be able to get into his head, positively, and be able to communicate with him and make him sort of realise who he was like how I realised who I was. It was a realisation moment. And that was the shift. And that's when everything began to change for me. And over the course of my school years there, and it was only a short period of time, 2.5 years, and they were some of the best years of my life, not just in school, but in general. I just had such good memories. But that's because I allowed myself to fit in. I pushed myself to a point where I overcome the struggles of being someone who was a bit different, but also someone who behaved, because that can be very intimidating when you're in a school where hierarchy is essentially who can be the naughtiest. You're the naughtiest, so therefore you're top dog. And I managed to become, in a sense, top dog from just being better. And because it became a status, it became the fact is that not everyone who goes to this school has to admit challenging behaviour. And to me, that was immeasurably profound, because I had learnt something from this. And, obviously I had good memories, but I think the final sort of moment for me was a while later on, towards the end of my school time there, when I sort of established myself as being someone who can communicate. But an event happened which really sort of put the nail in that coffin for me that, okay, I clearly have an ability here and that I have a voice for good. Now, that's not for vanity. I'm not saying that I'm good at talking, so therefore I should be talking. But like with this channel, the importance of communicating is fundamental to who we are as people. And if we don't communicate with each other, nothing will ever good come from that. We don't validate each other. We don't understand where we are as people. We can't fix our emotions. Nothing comes from not being able to express in verbal forms or whatever forms we use to communicate. We don't do that. We don't validate our views. And, you've got to say to yourself, who do we become when we don't do that? And from that moment, I remember that I was sitting in my religious education class, I was just finishing, and one of the care team came into the room and said to me, Kyle, can we talk to you? And obviously, I was a little bit like, oh, what have I done? And he told me that there's a student downstairs in the care office, which was a part of the building that was used to take students who that were having a particularly challenging moment and that needed to calm down, sort of in the safety of a room. And a TA came to me and said to a student, me, Kyle, we've got this student downstairs who needs to talk to you. And he asks for me specifically. And that was huge. And I remember running down there. At the time I didn't put much thought into it. I just ran down there feeling like a sort of member of staff myself and going, sitting down with this student and going, what's up? Do you want to talk? And I was only a year older than he was. And that was huge. And from that moment, my entire life has been panned out for me. Everything that I've ever done, I've learned from being from that one moment. I went to learn. I from that moment, I realised that I had an ability to communicate. So I then went to college and I wanted to do different things that mattered to me, that I love, like technology. I love technology. But also I wanted to put effort into things that I'm good at. And it's not necessarily things maybe that I love doing. Obviously I love communicating, but I also have my own passions and hobbies and dreams. And at the time, the idea of talking for a living wasn't really kind of something that I'd ever put much thought into. It's different now, but back then it was something that I happened to be good at, that I didn't necessarily put much energy on. And I decided to follow that path. And that path fundamentally allowed me to get into college, to develop friends, without those friends, I wouldn't have met my partner at the time. We then went on to obviously get a house together. And, my entire life changed from that one moment. Everything happened. If I didn't have that ability to communicate and have people say to me, well, Carl, you should do something about this. You should study this because you're good at it. And if I had said no, I wouldn't have made a friend who then later I became best friends with from that class, who then got me on a dating app to then meet my partner and then, spend 4 years with them and, move back here and where I live and where I'm at home. All those moments and who I became was really fundamentally from those moments in that school. And that came from me being a challenging child. So as much as it's hard for some people, and I'm sure for many people like yourselves who have family members who are potentially struggling with brothers, sisters, sons and daughters, or even parents with difficulties, we know that there's hope. There's a chance that we can develop a relationship with these problems, to understand them fundamentally, and how we can learn to break them down to their fundamental components, to understand how they work. And when we do that, we tend to find the answers. And that's what I want to establish here. And of course, over the next few videos, indefinite, I want to be doing this for as long as I can, because clearly you've made me see there's potential. And I want to go into different videos and express my viewpoints, how I overcame things, and what ultimately the lessons they taught me. So what I want all you to do is, if you have any budding questions for me, leave it in the email that's linked here and at the end of the video after the disclaimer, where you can get in touch with me, and any questions that you have about yourselves, your moments of realization, whether or not you feel like you're suffering or have something that's different to other people, friends, children, anything, just get in contact with me and talk to me. And in my future videos, I will go on and hopefully I can give you the answers that you seek to help you on your way in life. So that's ultimately really where I want to be. And as I said at the start, I cannot be more grateful to everybody's sort of love, attention, and followership, because it's made me realise that I have a voice, even more than ever. And I intend to do something good with that, and that's what I intend to do. So thank you so much for joining me on my second video. I wish everyone all the best, and I'll look forward to seeing you in my next video. Talk soon.